with the leaves and the sun and the wind, but no, it's okay. But I'm grateful anyway. Be thankful, right? Unto God and bless. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his
True.
endures all generations. Somebody knows their Bible. But we are excited about another Monday and another podcast episode. Before I get into the topic or this handsome guest over here, I want to encourage you to subscribe to the Charity Movement YouTube page, to find us wherever you listen to podcasts, and subscribe there as well. Turn on your notification bell so that you can hear about and get updates about all of the things that we are posting, so that you can support and watch it and share it with somebody that you know will want to hear it. Now, I know that you're already doing that. I know that you're already going to do that, and encourage other people you know to do that. I want to introduce to you again my guest for today, who is the pastor of Bethlehem Temple of Springfield Church, but who also is my husband. Hi.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for
Good.
having me back again.
Thank you for saying yeah. I appreciate it. You can say no, but I appreciate your yes. So we just got done a few days ago being a part of an interview for, there is an organization that our church belongs to called the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. Within that are different auxiliaries or departments, and there's a young people's department called the IPYPU. Within that, they have different missions that they do, including youth, young adult, but also like a marriage conversation as well. And so they have this segment, and it's in its third season, called The Love Story. And my husband and I were invited to be a part of that, and we recorded it and did it live a few days ago. And from that conversation, we really talked about our love story. And I thought it was very interesting when we got, like, when it was communicated to us that there was interest in hearing from us, because I don't look at our marriage like, and I don't know if you share the same sentiment, but I don't look at our marriage just like, this is our love story and this is like relationship goals. I just look at our marriage as is something that I treasure and I value, and I know that it's built on positive, godly principles that have allowed for us to have a happy life together. Now, what I will say is, before I start going into like questions and start really diving in, is that I am very careful not to identify ourselves or other people as like quote unquote relationship goals, because I think a lot of times it is built up to be a very externally like huge thing where you almost become like an idol to some people, right? Do you think that relationships have become so like idolized that they haven't even really talked about the value in relationship and marriage? What do you think about that?
I think that society has gotten to a position where relationships have become more one-sided than two-sided, to the point where everything is more transactional instead of being,
Yeah.
quote unquote relational. And that's why we see so many divorce rates are at an all-time high, whether they want to say it or not, because separations don't fall under the direct divorce. Some people are married but yet not living together and living their own lives, but technically they're not together.
Yeah.
So those relationships are not mended. Those relationships are broken. It's so many things where people just don't know. Some say social media has something to do with it as well, in terms of people not being able to have real conversations with people in real time. And that's where, we've seen the decline in relationships in general.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I do love how you talk about how relationships now, it feels like it's not even relational. There's not a foundation of respect, love, God. It's become a transactional conversation. And so we talked about a lot of things on that live, and I'll actually put it in the description box of that live so that you can check it out, after you watch this video. But I thought it was a very interesting, neat conversation, and we talks in detail about this infamous list. Okay, so this episode today is actually called The List. Okay,
Here we go again.
So let's start this off with a great question. So, what is a list?
So a list is basically what a man or female would like in their ideal mate. Taking as shallow as just how you want your mate to look, or is going as detailed as where they come from, background, job, etc., etc. So typically, at least what I've known is to put on the list all of the things that you expect, all the things that you don't expect. But obviously, the detail that I added later on was what things can you compromise in. So what things are or are not a deal breaker.
Good to know. So, when did you build this list? Why did you?
I built a list after, technically, I built an official list after the breakup. I was engaged the first time. So originally I prayed and the Lord had answered my prayer. And of course, that relationship ended. And when I was in Benton Harbor, the Lord was dealing with me about, some of the healing and things like that. And so one of the things I did first, actually, which I didn't talk about in the podcast, was I wrote letters to all of the people that hurt me, whatever relationships it was, male or female. And so I wrote those letters. Most of them was, like actual like relationship because I wanted to be married. So I wrote letters to those people. It wasn't to be sent out. It was just for me to get it off of me and on paper. And so I did that. And then that's when I sat down and actually created a specific list. And that was really, that kind of came from like, studying. So like I said, in the time when I was in Benton Harbor, I did a lot of studying. Some of it good, some of it not so good. But it started to put my mind in the position of what I expected. The next time I met somebody and really, really was dating, I wanted to be dating for marriage. I didn't want to be dating just to be dating.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the fact that you brought up that prior to you getting back out there dating, courting, looking into marriage, you actually wrote letters without even thinking about, obviously you weren't going to send them out, but it was to get those thoughts out of your brain and get it out of you. So it's really like you kind of growing from it, transitioning out of it. And the fact that you got that from the Lord, it just shows how he is the great physician and how he really knows us, because that is exactly the type of exercise that therapists and counselors advise for you to do when you go through a different level of trauma. So the fact that God gave that to you just shows that, God really knows everything. He really knows strategies to help you move through that grieving process, because it is grieving what you thought would happen, how you thought your life would be, what your timeline could have been, is a grieving process. So the fact that God gave you that idea is really awesome. Okay.
And I would add to that because when you say God gave me the idea, and God, obviously, God gives all the ideas, but I was having a conversation. I don't want to misquote it, but I think I was having a conversation with now Bishop Carlton Burrell, and it wasn't really about relationships. It was about something else in general. And the idea was sparked based on him. He was saying that he did, wrote a letter to somebody or whatever the case may be. And that's when it sparked in my mind, like, maybe that's something I should do. And so that's when I prayed about it. And then I wrote letters to all the people that I felt like I had hurt from. And that really helped me, to really be able to move on and transition from that stage.
Wow.
My list had to do with more things that were coming from a biblical or spiritual perspective. So, reading the scriptures, it said, for, women not to be so adorned with like jewelry and stuff like that. So I didn't want a woman with earrings. It said in Leviticus not to wear which pertained to a man. So my understanding then was women shouldn't wear pants. So
Okay.
I wanted I wanted to I wanted her to wear dresses all the time.
Okay.
One preacher I don't listen to him often anymore. I don't even know if he's saved anymore, but I'm not even gonna shout him out. But he had a big thing about women wearing weave and wearing makeup, and so that was like, you know what? I want, I want a natural woman too. So that was on my list, not to wear, makeup and wearing a lot of makeup and fake hair and all that. So those are a few things that was on the list. And like what I said in the podcast, Sister Wiggins let me know that I needed to find what I would compromise on. And so there were some of those things did get to a point where I was like, you know what, it's not really that big of a deal. Obviously, the light had came in. I went from Ben Harbor to Flint. I came out of the wilderness, so now I came in a new light. And so the Lord helped me to see the scriptures for what they were. So there you have it.
Some tidbits of what was on that list. Were there any things that you realized were unrealistic or unnecessary to to have that as your mate?
Well, to be honest,
Mhm.
I didn't think anything on the list was unrealistic. To be
Okay.
honest with you, to be honest, if I knew that if I left Michigan, I could go somewhere and I can find exactly what it was I was looking for in terms of what was on that list.
Mhm.
And so that my thing wasn't, I wanted God to show me who it was. I didn't want to force my hand to say, you know what, I know I can go here, or I know I can go here, and put myself in position. I wanted to ensure that I was walking in the grace that God was giving me.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay. And so you brought up how Lady Wiggins and Flint sat you down and had that conversation. Tell me how important it is, especially from a man. Tell me how important it is that whoever is giving you advisement, that they present it in a way that you can receive it. Because the way you said it, and maybe you can tell a little bit about that story on this episode, but like how important it is for you to season your words with grace when you're giving that type of advisement.
Well, I think it's important, number one, for one of my favorite scriptures is where it talks about not being offended.
He said they that love
Great
thy
peace
law.
have they that love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. I really took that to heart. Like, I didn't want to get offended by something that somebody said, especially when it's feedback. Now, of course, some people try to give you advice and you didn't really ask for the advice. And that's really been a big thing, I think, from a millennial and a zennial perspective. Why are these people telling me this? Like, I didn't ask them for their advice.
Mhm.
And so, instead of looking at it from the flip side and saying, you know what, these people actually care enough to give me a little bit of their time to try to share some wisdom with me. And so, again, that was my perspective, is that nobody's going to sit me down and talk to me unless they really actually care about what it is that's going on. And so,
Yeah.
like I said, I don't remember exactly where it was. I think we were at the house. I think we were at Pastor Wiggins and Lady Wiggins' house. I think we were in the kitchen. I think they had just fed me or made some food or something like that. I think we went over to get some turkey knuckles. Shout out to Bishop Wiggins. I need some more turkey knuckles because that sounds really good right now. But we were sitting down, and that's she was talking to me. And I think it was around or right after I kind of tried to talk to somebody, and that didn't really work out.
Okay.
And she was just like, you got to really focus in. Like, I know you really want somebody that's boom, 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 but it's like, you need to really look at, what it is that you're looking for in a wife, and, how that complements you. And, that was kind of the gist of the conversation. And so, like I said, I looked at that, and I went back and I started going through my list. I think that came up, like the list came up, like certain things that I was expecting, because I know she knew how staunch I was about the scriptures and certain things. So, but I did go back and I kind of scoured through, and I'm like, all right. Actually, I rewrote the list and then made it like non-negotiable, can deal with, can't deal with. So it had three
Okay.
different categories on that list. And so I went through all of those, and that's where I really need to find a notebook. I don't know where that notebook is. It might be gone. I don't know, but it was in a notebook. I know because I wrote it in a notebook. That was where the list was. But I went and rewrote the list, and so that's when I kind of got to the position where now kind of seeing what God is doing, and then I work through it as I go.
Okay. So let me put on another cap.
Mhm.
So you made your list of, things that were like negotiable, non-negotiable things. For the people that say on the flip side, like, well, what do you bring to the table? How did you prepare your mind for that, or did you think that when the Lord illuminates who it is that I should start talking to, or you know they won't even think that way, or I'm not going after the person that's asking, what do I bring to the table? What do you say to that part of the conversation?
Well, see, the thing about that is I can't say that I prepared for it. At that time, I was progressing in my career. It was pretty much out there. In fact, the time where I was out there actually dating and courting was the time I actually moved to Flint, and the water crisis going on. So I mean, there were articles where the news came and interviewed me about things that were happening. So my name was out there.
Yeah.
So to me, especially for those that might have been in the circle or might have known anything about what I was doing, it was already out there that I'm not gonna say a big shot, but everything I had, everything was together.
He was the table.
I didn't, yeah, I didn't have any debt. I didn't have any, I didn't have any like, all my bills were being paid on a regular basis. I was paying for my own apartment. There was nothing, there was nothing to even think about. I was taking care of everything. Even like school debt, I didn't have any of that. I had no debt. Literally, I'm just paying my apartment. I had just bought a second car because I bought my Jeep. So I had two cars at the time. I was living life. So I was in the position and I had enough money saved up really to where I could have already put a down payment on a house. But I was waiting for getting to that relationship so I could do that process with my wife.
Yeah. So for those that want to make a list, make sure you got something to go along with that list. I'm not talking about you got to be rich, but before you make a whole bunch of requirements for someone else, make sure you got a little something for yourself. Next question. I'm glad you said it. Okay. So
make your list.
So how do you discern if a desire is a God-led desire or an ego-led desire?
When you say that, you mean like things that's put on the list?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that's what I've made lists before. So that's why I said that's why I went through the process of, like I said, that mental list I had before. Everything was more superficial. I wanted her to look like this, blah blah blah. I'm not gonna go down, but the point of the matter is, I had a physical list, and the person that I had before met the criteria of the physical list to the T. So again, I had no issues, like I said, with that person. And like I said, we spent 3-4 years together, but spiritually, we were not compatible. And that's what later came out. And that's when God was showing me, again, I'm going through grieving, right? Because not just only because of, a breakup, but from the fact of the matter that I was warned prior to this. And I don't think I mentioned this on the podcast, but my spiritual grandmother, Mother Sumlin, who's going on to be with the Lord, called my mother's house looking for me. I came into the house maybe about 5 minutes after she called. As soon as I got the phone and said, "Praise the Lord," she said, the girl, she didn't even say, "Praise the Lord." I said, "Praise the Lord." She said, "The girl you with is not your wife. Saith the Lord. Don't continue any further," basically, something like that. And she might have said something else along the lines. And then I said, "Okay." And then I gave the phone back to my mom and I left. And I was upset, because who wants to hear that? Like, I'm thinking I got a good thing going on. We hadn't had any arguments. None of that stuff was going on. But Mother Sumlin sent a word from the Lord. And so now that whole word comes back to me while everything had ended, right? And so now I'm going through this and like, all right, it's not just the pain I feel from the relationship, it's the pain I feel from disobedience. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's where, that healing process really got, because it's one thing to let people down. It's another thing to let God down and know that you didn't do what you should have done.
Did you ever ask me if I had a list?
Yes.
What did I do?
That I didn't meet the criteria. Light skin and short was not on the list.
So, okay. So on the live that we did, we talked about the list from his perspective. So I never really talk about the list that I had because prior to meeting, learning of him, dating him, I went through an entire maybe 6 to 9 month process with the Lord where the Lord was teaching me not to be shallow. So I was learning that the physical attributes that I wanted in a person was not necessarily what God desired for me, and I had to get out of that type of mindset because I would just, no, turn it off. I don't care how interesting, how spiritual, no. If that person was not this type or this height or this, I was not going for it, and that was not doing me any good. And so I believe that the Lord was preparing me to handle Bernard the right way because I was very cut and dry. no, thank you. God bless you. Have a great day. And so God was teaching me to love what he loves and love who he loves. But I think that it not just did that relationally when meeting Bernard, but I think it taught me that even in ministry with loving people no matter what they look like, no matter who they are, really having that type of compassion that God wants for us, not just on a relational way in a marriage, but also in the way that we minister out into the world. And so God really broke some things down in me. Like I would be walking down the street and the Lord would begin to speak to me like, if I brought somebody to look like him, how would you react? If I asked you to do, if I told you to start ministering to this type of person, what would you do? And God was really showing me how not to be in my head and not to be egotistical, and not saying anything about my husband. My husband is very handsome. Like I love him and I'm very territorial of my husband. But I just, if you would have asked me years prior before meeting my husband, like that guy, what do you think? I'm like, he's a very nice looking guy. That's it. But I'm grateful that God really showed me like it's more stuff that needs to be on your list that's not on your list. But I did want someone who would be able to lead me because I am not an ignorant woman. I am an educated woman. I am a spiritually sound woman. And so I'm not looking to coddle anyone. I'm not looking for anybody to lead me to a ditch. Hallelujah. I wanted somebody who could lead me and guide me in the truth. I wanted somebody to be able to understand and embrace the fact that they are not married to somebody that is a follower. They are married to somebody that is a leader. They are married to somebody who wanted a career that was going to be successful in life, and that wasn't going to dim my light, and neither was I going to dim theirs. And so I married somebody who would protect me, who would shield me, who would provide for me. And I think I like all of those things were checked off my list. And I think let's talk about the checks off of the list. How soon after we started dating did you start seeing like the things checked off of your list?
On date 2.
Can you like just talk about a couple of those? You don't have to talk about all of them.
Yeah, in date 1, I touched your ear at the date. Said, "Oh, you ain't got no earrings." And then I asked while we were at the date. I said, "So you don't wear pants?" And then you told me what happened, and why you stopped wearing pants. I said, interesting. And then we talked about makeup, and you kind of mentioned that you wore makeup, but you said you didn't wear makeup every day. And so, I took that back to the Lord and said, is that something we basically kind of deal with, and didn't get any red flags. So, it's good to go after that.
Good to go. And then, so you said that was date 1. What about date 2? You said by date 2.
Yeah, by date 2, it was confirming everything that happened in date 1 to make sure it wasn't like, you just telling me that just to tell me that in date 1. Even though technically date 1 was really not a date, it was just conversation that turned into a date.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, after, talking with the Lord and conversing, and then obviously setting up the second date where we actually close the restaurant down again. That's another part of the story that I don't think gets shared as much. But yeah, that is, that's when the list was like, check, check, in terms of meeting those requirements. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to make it after that, but, those requirements, at least, some of the initial things were checked off.
Okay. So when did you know that you were like, oh, yep, I can marry this woman?
Probably at the start of the year. I don't remember exactly what was going on, but I know we had already went on a couple of dates. I want to say it was right after the event where I dropped you off, and then I got pulled over by the police. Because I think we weren't engaged yet then. Yeah, it was yeah, and I got pulled over by the police. And they told me to get out, and I wasn't even speeding for the record. And you stayed on the phone the whole time, and you started praying, and because I believe those prayers made the police person, become sensible in the matter, and then realizing that the car actually wasn't stolen, even though I thought the car was stolen, but I had had the car for over a year, so how could it be stolen? But yeah, I think that was really what that situation there kind of solidified, because you stayed on the phone and you prayed the whole time, and then you stayed on the phone with me until I actually got home after that whole incident happened.
Okay. So in that moment, what did that tell you about me to say like, okay,
the spirituality is what it was, because I was looking for, again, remember my first list was more natural. My second list was supposed to be spiritual, even though it did kind of cover things that were on the outside. But again, I can't see the inside until the inside is made visible, because it's not what's on the outside of the dish, it's what is on the inside, what that will eventually manifest. And so those things began to manifest, and that's when God began to give me confirmation.
So I think it's interesting because after the live that we were on a few days ago, we actually had a conversation about, it's really important that a person is honest when they're courting, especially for those of us who are led by the Lord, and we know how important marriage is, that covenant is to God, and how you should not break it. And so we were talking about how you should just be honest about who you are. Like, when he and I dated, you just got to know how somebody is. Like, I didn't tell him that I wasn't going to wear makeup. I didn't tell him I wasn't going to wear jewelry. Now, if that makes me ticked off the list, Godspeed. But that's not going to change how I am. Just like when he started saying what his, the things on his list, I didn't lie about anything. And I think that it is important that we don't show up as, the best practice part of ourselves, but we show up by who God has made us to be, because eventually those attributes that you really have will come out. And that's why you find, like, after people get married, they're like, who did I marry? Because you married someone's representative. You didn't marry the real them. You didn't see them without, without the concealer. You didn't see them for who they truly were. So then you don't know. You don't know if they can pray. You don't know if they fast. You just don't know. And so I'm glad that you got this to see me in different seasons so that you can make the best decision.
Great.
So how important it is after you make the list, after that person is checking off boxes of that list, how important is it before you decide to get married to get counseling? How important is that?
I think it's quite critical, because when people are dating, you're looking for somebody to check off, all the boxes. And obviously, like I said, people should make a list. I am a firm believer that you should make a list. But even after you make a list, you're not going to get down to all of the nuances that it takes from a marriage perspective. Just like, there's books on, raising children and those types of things, but there's really not a book to really teach you how to parent your child, because your child is not going to be like somebody else's child. And likewise, your marriage is not going to be like somebody else's marriage.
Very good.
And when people can understand that their marriage is not going to look like somebody else's marriage, that's when you need to have all the information to make the right, number one, right decision. But also, once you make the decision to marry, you have all the information so that you don't feel like you blindsided.
You want the right
Don't act
tools.
don't act like you didn't already know this information. That's where counseling helps, because counseling will bring out things that you can't get, or you won't be able to get in just normal conversation or dates and different things like that. Because realistically, who dates and actually ask all the right questions in the dates, whether it's date 3, date 7, date 20, 200. There's people that dated for 7 years, and when they get married, they only stay married for 3 years and then they get divorced. So the point of the matter is that you always need an outside perspective, especially one that is wise, to ask the right questions, to have a skill set to bring that out, because everybody can't counsel.
Exactly.
You got to have the right person
Right.
or people to counsel, so that they can bring out the information that you have not already gathered, so that you can safely make a decision and say, hey, we are going to move forward, or you know what, we're not going to move forward. And it's perfectly fine that you're not going to move forward, because now you found out things that you were not going to be able to find out on your own.
I remember very vividly about us having a conversation in marriage counseling, and it was about, so our pastor, Pastor Wiggins, he knew about my family. He knew that we were not well off. He knew that my parents just did not have it. He knew that I was like graduating from college, and I didn't have anything. I didn't have any debt, but I also didn't have anything. Okay. I was starting my career. And our pastor asked him, like, well, you marrying somebody that's just starting out in their career. Are you okay with that? Like, are you okay with being the man and taking care of your wife? And how did you respond to that?
No problem.
And then he said, she don't have to work because she don't want to. It's like, what? Which he knew that wasn't like, I want to go to work. I want to contribute to our household. But he was like, she don't ever have to if she don't want to. And that really hit me because as someone who has worked since 14, 15 to help my parents make sure that we had utilities paid and things provided for us, to hear somebody tell you, like, I want to take care of you. I want to provide for you. I want you to be able to lean on me. That's scary. That's overwhelming. And so to have him, really keep his word, I don't know, I think it speaks a lot to you, not just as my husband, but just as a man. Like, you keep your word. And I appreciate that. And I love that about you and our marriage. And I love Pastor Wiggins for really asking hard questions, because we would leave counseling like in silence because of just how deep and how intentional he was to make sure that we were both not going into this blind. So just because he was under Pastor Wiggins' leadership for longer, that did not mean that he was on his side or on my side. Like, he was equally asking hard questions to ensure that we were clear about the decision that we were about to make. And I appreciate that. Okay. So let's talk marriage now and lists. Do you still have a list for your wife as we go deeper in marriage?
No.
Really?
No.
You don't have like expectations that we should give to each other?
Those are marriage vows.
But that's a list.
It's a duty. You take a lifetime. I mean, you could say it's a list, but I don't track it. And if you start acting crazy, then I'm gonna just take you to the pastor. See, I pray. I just ask the Lord, God, you gave me this wife.
I pray too.
God, you gave me this wife.
I pray too. Okay. So when I ask that question, in my head, and I don't know if you do this too, but in my head, even if we have a disagreement or something, in my head, I try to make sure that I show up in areas that I feel like you might need to show up. Like, he said this week as we were preparing for a Founders Day service at our church, he talked about how frustrated he was hanging stuff on his wall in his office at church. And I said, well, in my head, I'm like, that's my thing. Why didn't you ask me? And so he tried to do it himself and he got frustrated. And so today, yesterday, I went into his office and I started hanging stuff, because in my head, I'm like, well, if my job is to help make your life easier, why don't you use me to make your life easier? Why didn't you check it off your list? So why didn't you do that?
There's other things that need to be done at the church. Actually, my office was the last. That wasn't even part of the Founders Day at all. I just cleaned up my office because it needed to be cleaned up.
But I think that's important. I think that the longer that you are married, you realize, okay, well, what areas can I kind of see in and try to make your life easier? I think the more you're married, you're like, okay, this is where I can fit. This is where I can kind of assist or support or help. And I think you do that for me too, because I call you all the time. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate that too. Okay. So let's talk about lists that you have for yourself. What are some things that you are personally trying to improve on or provide more insight on? It could be pertaining to our marriage. It could be pertaining to parenthood now that we're in the, we're kind of in it now. 7 years for our oldest, 4 for our youngest. What are some kind of characteristics, or even as a pastor, what type of characteristics are you continuing to build and shape?
I think what comes to mind is some leadership things it can cross, boundaries, whether it's in the home, on a job or pastoring, but making sure that whenever I get feedback, and I try to seek out feedback, but sometimes it's good to just let feedback come and just kind of work through things as you work through them. But being sure to put it to action as quick as possible, instead of kind of leaning on it or waiting around, just kind of making sure that it gets done right away. So, I mean, like for example, you give me feedback a lot of times and I don't want to sit on it. I rather try to, start trying to work through it so that I can be a better leader. So I would say that's one of the things that I'm working on from a attribute perspective. Every day I'm really thinking about, how can I be a better pastor in terms of helping those that are at the church, those that will at some point join the church in our community. Those types of things. How can I make more impact? What are certain things that I can do and I was not overextend my capacity, but at the same time push my capacity to the limit. I think there's a fine line between working too hard and not working hard enough.
Agreed.
And so trying to find that line where, some days I feel like I overwork and then other days I feel like I could have done more. And so trying to find that fine line where, and maybe that's the line. Maybe I, work hard one day, don't work hard the next day. I don't know what that looks like, but figuring out what that is, so that I don't feel like I have any regrets for doing the work of the Lord.
What are some characteristics that you're trying to emerge, um, if any, as a parent?
As a parent, I don't know if I thought all the way through that. I know that I guess I can think of something because my sons are young right now. My sons get on my nerves. And so I want the Lord to help me not to be stern, but not to be too lenient. Because I can remember my father didn't give us a lot of whoopings, but my mother gave us a lot of whoopings. So
Sorry.
I don't want to be like either way. I want to make sure that they learn the lesson because again, the flip side is that they're not me, right? What I did as a kid, although they have some traits of things that I may have done, they're not me. I was a smart aleck. I would, like Bernard Titus does pretty good work. He has really good grades in school, but I would do my classwork and then find a way to get in trouble. Whereas Bernard Titus is not trying to get in trouble. If he gets in trouble, it's legitimately because he didn't know what he was doing was actually not right. And so finding that fine line of, and then, I think because I have more education than my parents had. And so my parents probably could connect to me in a different way because they didn't go to college. Whereas sometimes I feel like I'm talking to my son and I'm using like big words. And I'm like, do you understand what I'm saying? He's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. And I try to find those words to bring it back down to a child's level so that he can understand which direction I'm going in. For example, just I think today or yesterday, they kept talking about something being literal, literally did this or literally did that. I said, what about if he figuratively? And he's trying to figure out what the word figuratively means because he doesn't know the word figuratively. He's only 7 years old. But not that he can't learn, he will learn. But just figuring out, the best way to communicate with my sons so that they understand what we're conveying so that they can be as great as God wants them to be.
Very good. So I think for me as a parent, I am learning, like you said, the balance between being lenient and being stern, but also really prioritizing those moments where we really get time with our children. I think that we do not talk about it enough as people of God, as people who, you're a pastor and I support as your wife and serve in the church, and we're both ministers and we preach and we do these things, and we work the altar and we do children's church, and then we work out in the community, and then we both have careers and all of these things. There is still two little people, two little human beings with souls that still need to be saved that are in our house that deserve our attention as well. And so I have been strategically thinking about how do I ensure in making our children a priority and making sure that they know that there is undivided time where we give to them without our phones, without any distractions, where they're the most important thing in our world in those moments. Because the school gets them for 8 or 9 hours. We are away at our job for 8 or 9 hours, and then we have to eat, and then we do other things in the community. So that takes our time. We're at church, that takes up our time, and then when we get home, a little split second before it's time for bed. And then you have the weekend, and sometimes it's still with church too. So it's just what time is there that I can hear about their day. They can tell me all their things that I don't know about, and I can just take from them and give to them, and we can kind of just give to each other. So I'm really dedicating time to really thinking about, like, how do I ensure that they don't feel left out as we do all these amazing things for other people. I don't know, the worst thing you can do in the world is like do all these amazing things for other people and then your children feel like they were neglected. Oh, I don't want to do that. And so I try every day to think about, like, what time can I give, or like let me stop what I'm doing to look at my children as they tell me about their day, so I can understand who they were talking to today and what friend they were chatting with today and what they want to do today. That's as a parent. In church, I'm just still trying to learn, like, what my lane is. Like, I feel like I'm very comfortable in my lane at our church because my husband is my pastor and he's very strategic and protective over me not feeling overwhelmed or not being overwhelmed. But just learning what my lane is very important, especially now having a couple of years under our belt. And as a professional, I have been publicly learning about what it feels like to be an executive leader as a woman, as a Black woman, as a saved Black woman, and what that feels like and how I can navigate in the world. And I am embracing being a confrontational leader. When my husband and I got married, and I feel like this is a testimonial professionally, when I got married, I was not confrontational at all. I did not want to have hard conversations. I would try to dodge and dip and duck and not address anything. After being married to him for almost 9 years, I'm ready to be confrontational. It makes me excited. And so, and it's the courtesy of being married to him who's confrontational. I love it, you know? So people who say, like, you can't change it, yes. And sometimes that changes. And confrontation is healthy. It oftentimes brings resolution to issues. And so I think that's something that I didn't even know that I would gain from being married to him. And I'm just grateful that that's a huge area that I've grown in because, you know, we are married to someone who always wants to have resolution and always wants to understand a problem and always wants to have a conversation. Eventually, you're like, okay, this is not that bad. There's good things about this. I don't know. So what's one area that you didn't know was being reshaped while being married to me that was reshaped?
Probably having greater revelation in the scriptures when it comes to, I wouldn't say judging other saints, but obviously having a different lens on the saints. Prior to being married, I think I looked at people, and if they acted like sinners, then I would just say that they're sinners. But some people, although they are sinners, some people are going through trials and tribulations that you just don't know nothing of. And sometimes it just takes somebody that is not looking at them in a way where they are a problem to help them get out of the situation that they're in. And so having that different scope, that different mindset, and actually it took kind of reflecting, because people may not know this, but I was a bully. And so I remember, I think it was 12th grade year, I had to work on a project with a young man. We were the same age, but he was somebody that we talked about all the time, coming through this program. And so now I had to work with this guy. And so as I'm working with him, realizing that we actually have a lot of things in common. TV shows we like, our taste in women was the same. It was just different things. And that's when it hit me that you can't judge a book by its cover. Just because somebody don't look the way you want them to look or sound the way you want them to sound doesn't mean that you automatically get to choose who that person is in your mind. You have to take the time to look at them from how God sees them.
Yeah.
And when you see people how God sees them, that will help you as well as help that person as well, if God is giving you an opportunity to be able to help them.
I love that.
I think being married has refined that, because again, like I said, when I started looking back at that, especially now being married, it really refined how I look at people in a greater light.
So if the word can be multidimensional, we can.
That's right.
The word is it.
I agree.
The word is it. Babe, is there anything that you would like to say before we end it? Do you want to give people information about our church?
For those that's watching, Bethlehem Temple of Springfield Church, 610 Parish Street in the beautiful city of Springfield, Michigan. If you have not come to visit us, I think you should set up a time to come and visit us. We have Bible study at 6 o'clock on Tuesdays, every Tuesday. And we have service at 10 o'clock Sunday school. We serve breakfast every Sunday, not just first and third or second and fourth. We serve good breakfast.
Good breakfast.
Every Sunday. I'm not talking about continental and cereal, although we do have those things, but we serve hot breakfast every Sunday. So we want to invite you to come 10 o'clock to Sunday school, between 11 and 11:15. Really, service starts at 11:15, but we like people to be there at 11, prepping themselves in prayer, for the power of the service. And God has really been blessing us, and we really want you to be a part of it. So that's my spiel. Make sure you watch this video on Charity Movement, and we love and appreciate you all. And remember, make your list, because that's where your husband and your wife is. It's in your list, and it's got to be an anointed list. Let God help you make your list. My list before was a physical list, but when I went into the scriptures and started although my wife may say it was a little bit rigid, but it got me my wife. So you need to make your list.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys for being a part of this episode. Thank my husband for being a part of the episode too. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would love for you to comment on this video about one thing you learned from it. It could be a funny detail. It could be something like a little nugget that God even illuminated to you that you want to tell us about as you go forward in your list. If you're making it, if you are preparing yourself for a spouse, you're submitting yourself unto the Lord so that you can then show that you're submitting yourself to your spouse. I would love to just learn where you are in that journey, whether you are male or female. All of us are on that journey, especially those that are looking for a spouse, waiting on God for a spouse. We want to make sure that you have the support that you need as you move forward. I'll also add Pastor's his social media handles, because you might want to ask him some questions about the list and even wisdom along the way. I appreciate you for tuning into this episode. I cannot wait for another one. This month, we'll really be talking a lot about relationship, okay? Whether it's marriage, friendship, all of that. I would really love to dive into that in this month of November. And I am thankful for you, and you. Please like this video. Share it with someone that you know. And turn on your notifications so you can keep receiving updates when episodes will drop. I love you. And remember that the only one stopping you is you. See you soon.